Hello, everybody.
Hello.
And right on time, Luna makes an appearance.
Yeah, she has needs. Hopefully she'll calm down about them. She wasn't she didn't even get to see one of the movies we watched, so I'm not sure how much she's really going to contribute to the discussion.
I'm Theo Black.
And I'm Sarah Black, and that's
Uh,
Luna Black that wanders around sometimes.
so we are now switching. We went from a month, which I would say is like half Sarah, half Theo, because it was bad movies and then it was sci-fi monster movies.
Right.
So we meshed together for a half month, and we've now moved into our February movies, even though I think some of the reviews we did are not releasing until next, anyways, whatever, which is going to be rom-com month, which is more like a 90-80% Sarah thing and like a 10-20% Theo thing. Not because I don't, not because I don't, not because I don't like rom-coms, but because like you like them a lot more than me, like a lot more than me. And I just don't know as much about them, though I am slowly through you, but because of you, becoming rom-com savvy. Like I'm hitting a lot of the things I've never seen, and like, oh right, I keep hearing this movie, I should have seen it a while ago. Blah blah.
Right, but already too, the two movies we watched so far, I would like to say, are of a higher caliber than any. I mean, we were watching deliberately bad movies, but even within that, like.
Okay, so spoilers for the record for any movie we talk about. This review is going to be It Happened One Night.
Yes.
But before we get to that, spoilers for everything. And so my question is, are either of these as good as Robot Monster?
It's apples and oranges, man. Like,
it is.
like there's no point in comparing.
No, there isn't. There's not at all. But it's just a funny question.
I would say Robot Monster is of a high caliber for what it is.
Yes.
But I wouldn't. You're not going to be like I feel you're not going to be like, I can't decide between It Happened One Night and Robot Monster. I just don't know which one I'd rather watch. I mean, they're pretty different kinds of movies.
They are. Oh, I've got a cat who is like sniffing. She's like just off screen sniffing at the microphone. This is one of her vantage points for looking out of the windows. Anyways, okay, so you're right.
Theo has a cat now and he's very excited. So
I am very excited.
No, he can be screwed over by the cat while he's trying to do things. It's great.
Yes.
Okay, so we watched It Happened One Night, which is a 1934 Frank Capra film. Do you want to summarize this one, or do you want to summarize Ninotchka, which is the other one we did, which we will talk about next?
I'll do this one. So this is technically pre-code. I think the code came into effect somewhere in 34 or 35. Maybe I'm a little early, but this is a pre-code movie. It stars Clarke, Gable, and Claudette Colbert. I'm assuming it's said the same way as what the other Colbert.
That's how I've always heard it.
And Claudette Colbert is the daughter of a rich guy. I don't exactly remember like what the stances are, but she's like a socialite, so she's in the newspapers and stuff. And essentially the movie is kicked off by her escaping the boat that her and her father are on so that she can go and marry this guy. Well, she's already married to him, but she can go and like officially be with him in a more, full capacity. And on the way, Clarke Gable, who's a newspaper man, sells stories to, he's just one of those old newspaper men. They end up on the same bus and he figures out who she is and he wants the scoop on her story. Oh dear. Sorry, cat fell. Cat's good. Oh, it's Chip. Chip doesn't usually show up.
I'm having cat issues too. And
where it's cats all around.
Your poor plot is becoming so muddled.
Yes, but so he wants to scoop on her story, and that is essentially what leads us into the movie as they then travel by bus and other means to get to New York, where she will eventually meet up with her husband. Romance ensues. So that's the plot of the movie. I did a little extra there. I'm getting better at these. I managed to bring that one back around. But
I would say, you've got a young heiress. Well, she's not that young, actually. You have an heiress who's escaping her restrictive life by marrying this guy. Her dad tries to keep her, annul the marriage and everything. And that's when she runs away.
I forgot the part where the father is like trying to annul the marriage.
And she jumps off a boat and swims away.
Yes. somehow manages to escape
Which
without
doesn't
being
that
caught.
happen in Platinum Blonde too? Like,
I haven't seen Platinum Blonde.
oh no, doesn't that happen in Bombshell? See, now I'm getting all screwed up on my Jean Harlow.
You are. I can't remember that well.
And
I mostly remember being a little icked out by some of the gender politics of Bombshell, which,
you're
it's
watching a movie from
I know, but I'm allowed to be icked out by the gender politics, even if it's a movie from 1930, whatever. It's
33.
still,
Okay.
it's like this movie is from 1934, and I'm not as wigged out by the gender politics. There's still some stuff here, but
yeah. Okay, so I want to say that I don't really like Capra films in general. Not that I think that they're bad, but generally his stories are not the kind of stories I get much pleasure from.
yeah.
But his filmmaking is typically pretty solid. There's nothing I have against how he tells his stories. And I had seen this probably in my mid to late teens. So it's been quite a while. And I kind of remember being bored by it and not liking it that much, but I wanted to give it another try. And I actually quite liked it on rewatch. But I want to hear your thoughts first, since you are not the rom-com guy.
So I have a thought about Capra and then a thought about the movie. So Capra, I've seen It's a Wonderful Life, Arsenic and Old Lace, and I'm forgetting the other movie I've seen of his. It's one of the famous ones. And basically, I'm kind of like you and Mom, where it's like Capra's stories are a bit too old school, like morality for me. Like they're not terrible. Like It's a Wonderful Life is a cute movie and a lot of people love it. And I get that. And most people aren't like, oh yes, we should go back to this kind of repressive era of, gender politics and so on. It's just a fun movie. There's a lot of like stuff about cheerfulness and the holiday spirit and blah, blah, blah. It's a little much for me, but I don't hate his movies. I tend to think, I realized watching It Happened One Night that Capra's movies are kind of like a warm blanket. Like, I probably like It's a Wonderful Life less than any number of other movies. Yet I'm probably more likely to return to watch a movie like Arsenic and Old Lace or It's a Wonderful Life or It Happened One Night than some movies I like more than it, because it's just a warm blanket. Like if you want traditional, like old Hollywood storytelling, old Hollywood film techniques, old Hollywood actors, if you want this kind of like really solid, like this is where movies come from, genre filmmaking or whatever filmmaking, like you go to Capra. I think Capra is like the definition of like archetypal Hollywood filmmaking stories and so on. So like It Happened One Night was like a warm blanket. The movie itself, divorced from my new theory on Capra, is like about as solid a rom-com as I've ever seen. Because again, this is like standard Hollywood filmmaking from the 30s. Everything, this is what everything comes from almost. Like maybe it's not the first, Capra wasn't the first, director. He didn't make the first movie or anything like that. But this is kind of like as standard as you get. And everything sort of breaks the rules by breaking the rules that like are in Capra movies, kind of.
Right.
He didn't establish it necessarily. I mean, I don't know. But, everybody's breaking these rules. Like it has all the things in it that you expected. There's the meet cute. It's not like the meet cute is never like, oh, they love each other. It's always like there's some sort of consternation or conflict. Then we have, with them on the bus and the seat and him being kind of used by it. Then there's sort of the characters at odds because she wants to be with another man. He just wants to scoop up the story. She doesn't know what she's doing. He's there to help her. Some of the gender politics in there is a little like, this is the 30s, but whatever. And
but that's how it was. God damn it.
Yes, but what? Am I not allowed to be upset and not like it? I'm aware that's how it was. It's still annoying.
It was a different time.
Yes, I know it's a different time. I'm not an idiot. I still find some of the gender politics icky. Am I not supposed to find them icky? Am I supposed to be happy?
It's an uninteresting thing. It's kind of like in Rome, they were a little sexist. Like, okay.
But the thing about the gender politics is mostly Clarke Gable is charming in this. Like usually, like in a movie like something like Bombshell, it's really just icky and it's like, oh God, he's gonna, so like why the gender politics are weird. Here it's like Clarke Gable is actually really like enjoyable and so on. And it's like, would Claudette Colbert really be this little about things? Like she seems almost.
Have you met rich people now?
Yeah, that's true.
What are you talking about?
But see, rich people now. Well, I don't know. Anyways, but so like there's all of that, and there's all the conflict from that. There's the whole Wall of Jericho thing where he's being, chivalrous and putting a blanket in between them so he can't watch her, and that's good. There's like this is all stuff I feel like I haven't seen that many rom-coms, and I've seen this before, but it does it with such great pacing, and Clarke Gable and Claudette Colbert are such good actors, and the way it's shot is really well done. And there's the scene where they're acting out being an abusive couple, sort of, which is very amusing and also made me feel weird inside. And like that's a really kind of cute scene. And then there's the whole thing with the carrots, and suddenly we're outside and the lighting's a little foggy, which I don't understand, but it looks really good. And so it's like I almost don't have any complaints about this movie. Like it's just good kind of from start to finish. It's not a Theo movie, but like it's good from start to finish. Like I don't have anything. The reason I'm even talking about the gender politics is because like I gotta find something to complain about. And there's a little bit of weirdness with like the power dynamics between them, even though she's the rich one and he's not rich, but he's the man, so he still it's all that. So it's like I don't know. I don't have any. That's my complaint, is like I have to find something to complain about, and that's kind of what I got.
True. So okay. First, I want to respond. I don't find Capper to be a warm blanket because my issue with Capper, and you cannot get me to watch It's My Wonderful Life again and really focus on it under any circumstances. I do not like the romanticizing of small town Americana. Small towns are fine, but when you have the small town, warm, loving, good, big city, bad, full of evil people, like I just can't take it. Like, and it feels really American. I don't know if they do this in like Italy or France or England. I mean, certainly the country, rural areas, smaller towns are seen a certain way. I think in England they're seen as charming. But like I'm way more Lewis Sinclair Main Street, if we're gonna get literary, where it's like small towns are small. Like, big cities are big. There's lots of different kinds of people in both places. So that, and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington has it too. It just really rubs me the wrong way. And I don't find anything really comforting or charming about it, to be honest. But I understand why people do. You like there's this romanticizing of like the country boy who is moral and knows what's right and wrong. And I like that character under certain circumstances, but just not that into those kind of stories. But It Happened One Night doesn't have any of that. He's a newspaper reporter. She's an heiress. They're both kind of big city people. And there's none of this, like, they don't learn to be better people through meeting a farmer or something like that, which would, I think, drive me crazy. But I overall completely agree with you that this is like a textbook for a rom-com. And I'm going to torture you a little bit in a moment. And I don't want to repeat what you've said too much, but I'm kind of curious. This is 1934. It is pre-code, but it's not as racy as some pre-code stuff I've seen, not like the Gold Diggers, Busby Berkeley stuff. I'm curious how many of the tropes that we see in this movie can be found before this movie. And we've lost so many silent films that I don't think we could ever be confident about it. But there are so many rom-com tropes that I see in K-dramas regularly that are in this that, yeah, I mean, Shakespeare certainly wrote romantic comedies. He had things like people switching genders and pretending to be other people and stuff that I know still survives in romantic comedies today. So it's not, I don't know what Shakespeare may have already had. I can't remember. It's been a while since I checked out any of those. But I'm pretty sure Shakespeare didn't have people falling against each other in a bus either. So, right. So Theo, do you know what tropes you recognized? Do you feel like...
Well...
Or do you want me to just do the list I found? I'm kind of curious if anything stuck out to you.
Okay, so here's what I've got. There's the... pretending to be someone else, like pretending to be a couple. There's the pretending to be husband and wife, which is a trope of some kind.
Yes,
I think.
There's
so. The playing, both being actors pretending to be someone else, basically, which I assume is a trope. Her falling into his lap on a bus, like that's a trope of some kind, right?
Yeah, K-drama's got versions of that. It's called skinship. Someone's always falling into someone. Sometimes on buses in K-dramas all over the place.
I feel like the luggage, like stuff getting stolen, might also be a trope. Let's see what else. There's the misunderstanding trope where like at the end, like there's a misunderstanding between the two, and that's how they like are gonna not end up as a couple, but then of course they do end up as a couple. There's the running. Oh, go ahead.
No, and the next thing, which I think you're getting to,
The running away from a wedding scene.
We saw that in so many modern American rom-coms for sure.
Yeah, I feel like that's a female thing. I wonder how many men actually run away from a wedding.
No, it doesn't happen very much, does it?
I feel like men, like if men, this is one of those things where it's like women are almost more allowed to do it in movies, but men, if they do it in a movie, they just come off such more as scumbags or something. I'm not sure. I don't. It's just a thought I've had. Let's see what else there's. God, I'm running low on them.
Do you want me to take over since you kind of got your...
I think I've gotten most of what I can remember. I'm sure there's more that I'm just not.
I think we've seen a million reporters and writers and so on, and he's a reporter.
Right. That's
She's
true.
a rich girl. We've definitely seen million movie that we were gonna watch and then I accidentally skipped, but we may end up watching with our mom instead, is Nothing Sacred from 1937, just a few years later. And would you believe it has a reporter and a rich girl? But again, rich women are always, you know, I mean, I'm sure Shakespeare had rich women in his stories too. So
Right.
They've always been kind of a fascinating. A reporter, I feel like, is more new. A road trip, definitely.
Oh yeah, road trip.
She sleeps on his shoulder on the bus. I have seen this happen in at least 50% of the K-dramas I've watched.
Yes, that's one.
Clarke Gable going shirtless.
Guinevere, get out of there. What do you do? My cat's in our dish rack. There's no dishes in the dish rack right now. She's just standing in the dish rack. Sorry. Okay, keep going.
Clarke Gable going shirtless, and you'll notice he didn't wear an undershirt. According to Wikipedia, this started a fad. I don't know if I trust Wikipedia, but that's interesting. But yeah,
it's an urban myth, whether or not it's a true urban myth. I've heard of this as well.
Yeah, so Clarke Gable goes shirtless because in a heteronormative kind of a way, rom-coms are for women. Women like to see the men without the shirts on. Singing on the bus. You know, characters end up singing together. That's a thing I've seen more than a few times. The pretending to be married cohabitation thing is a thing where people have to spend the night together or they end up having to live together or so on. We've seen that before. He carries her.
Yes.
That's a thing. Guy's got to carry the lady somewhere.
To carry her somewhere.
And then big misunderstanding, interrupted wedding. You got those. And then drinking. He does the drinking in this one. In the other one, we see they both end up drunk. So those are like, and we could go to tvtropes.com and I'm sure it would lay them all out. But those are kind of the ones I noted. Another thing is it's got the iconic hitchhiking scene, which was copied dozens and dozens of times, where Clarke Gable builds up how he's going to hitchhike and he knows all the different ways of thumbing a ride. And of course it gets him nowhere. And she walks out and shows a leg and immediately a car pulls over. Yes. That's like an iconic scene that got copied. I also thought it did well at walking that you have to have your main characters in conflict, but in a romance, they also need to fall in love.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I don't like it when it gets mean and mean-spirited, and I don't really want them to end up together, and I don't know why I'm watching this and I don't like it. Other people seem to have less trouble with that than me, but to me it stretches. It's just unpleasant when people are really cruel or mean to each other, and then you have false equivalency apologies. I thought this did a good job where they kind of snipe at each other and would be mean to each other, but it never really crossed the line of no return for me. And then there were times where it would be kind of playful banter. And I think right before they did the hitchhiking scene, even there's like, she's complaining about being hungry and so on. And they're kind of snipping at each other, but it's kind of comfortable. It's the kind of teasing and banter you do with someone where you know you're not going to hurt their feelings. You know that you're comfortable enough to tease them and know what you can tease them about and what's not going to upset them. And that's when you do that kind of thing. And I thought this movie did a pretty good job with that kind of dialogue.
Yeah, I agree completely. Like so sometimes something that's missing from the rom-com is even why the two people are like really together and like connected. Sometimes it's like, well, they were once a couple, and it's like, I don't believe that, like, what is it, Sweet Home Alabama, where it's like, I don't really believe the setup for that movie and like why they're still interacting.
Yeah.
There's kind of a reason, but also I don't like that movie.
Well,
It
that's
doesn't
one where
make
I
sense.
thought they were really mean to each other, and I'm like, I
Yeah, I
guess
don't know
better they
why.
be together than with someone else have to put up with either of them, but I don't like them very much.
Yeah, whereas in this one, like he wants the scoop, he wants the story, and that
Hmm.
makes sense. It's worth some amount of money. And she needs someone to help her because A, she's had all her stuff stolen and has no money, and B, she's a little, she's not completely like, clueless, but she doesn't really understand what's going on. There's the whole scene, and then there's scenes like dunking the donut, like how you dunk a donut. Like, why is that scene there in like a traditional plot where like in an action movie you would never have that kind of scene, because in an action movie you need to keep a certain pace, but a rom-com is a slower, it's usually a slower kind of story, and you can have scenes where you dunk the donut, because that's really a scene more, again, that's a scene for conflict and like, well, no, I guess they couldn't get together because, but it's also a cute scene where he's like trying to teach her how to do this thing. So it's, you get, rom-coms often like just skip over the scenes where they like build the romance or where they like build an intimacy and are just interested in the conflict and the plot. And I
Right.
actually think rom-com movies don't really need as strict plots. Like,
Right.
their plots are a lot less strict than a thriller or an action movie. You just need the dunking of the donuts or the carrots or the she gets scared because he leaves to go find carrots when they're sleeping in that field together. And like, that's, you need that kind of like tension of like, well, they're making beds and he's getting annoyed at her and she's getting annoyed at him because they've been traveling together for a while and blah blah blah. But then she gets scared because she doesn't really know she isn't really prepared to do things by herself.
Yeah.
So this has all those scenes, and all those scenes are wonderful. Like, I suddenly want to dunk donuts into coffee, even though I don't like coffee and I don't eat donuts that often. So like, it's that kind of, I wanted to eat carrots, even though, I mean, carrots are fine. I put them in things, but like, it makes you want to be a part of that intimacy, is like how well crafted and how I thought there was a lot of chemistry between Claudette Colbert and Clarke Gable, so yeah, it includes the stuff you need to include that is often forgotten in a worse version.
I get what you're
Rom-com.
saying. It's interesting because reading Wikipedia, again, with a massive grain of salt, Claudette Colbert thought this movie was going to be terrible. And she apparently had a previous bad experience with Capra. So it's possible that she was just feeling a bit uncertain based on that, like based on what had happened before. But I can also see making a movie like this, as an actor, you're usually not filming in chronological order. You're just filming scenes. I could see how this might feel like a plotless mess.
Yeah.
But you mentioned thriller and so on, but a lot of action films don't have brilliant plots either, and a lot of people just watch them because they like action. I think rom-com can be the same. You just like seeing people interact and fall in love and do certain things and plot. I think Ninotchka has a stronger plot. We'll talk about that next. A more interesting kind of out there plot. But you've got a road trip. They've got to get from A to B. They're going to fall in love along the way. You don't need much more than that if you have good writing and good acting.
So like in an action movie, you have usually, in an action movie, whatever kind it is, it's like you have to get here to get the MacGuffin, to go here to give it to this person double crosses you, have a moment of uncertainty, and then you go here with the MacGuffin. Like, there's all of that. And in a so like it's not so different, but and it's still an A to B usually for an action film, like even more than a rom-com. I would say it's an A to B kind of deal. But like in a rom-com, and this is a road trip rom-com, so it is literally A to B, but it's more like something happens, there's conflict, that conflict gets resolved, but in the resolution of that conflict, you now have a new problem, which is still pretty standard storytelling. They're kind of both doing the same thing, but the action movie is more like a focused goal of like, I'm going here to do this. Whereas in a rom-com, it's like, we're on this bus, we're gonna get there. Oh wait, no, we missed the bus because of
Right.
this. This means this. Now we're doing this. So
I
it's
think
like,
also with a rom-com, your goal is emotional. The goal is to have two characters fall in love, and that's just going to inherently involve less plot. I mean, we think of plot as things that happen,
yeah.
but we think of that in terms of what we can see visually. and really with a rom-com, the goal is an emotional
No, you're right.
thing, and that might call for less.
I think in most good, sorry.
I think that calls for less physical action, but you still have to have that happen because you can't watch people feel things for 2 hours. So
no, well, that'd be just like looking at their eyes for 2 hours. That'd be weird. In a good action movie or a good rom-com movie, of course, you generally have both. Like, not everything has to adhere to standard structure, but a lot of what people like in a rom-com, like It Happened One Night, has a physical plot. The emphasis is just on the emotional plot. And that's true in general for rom-coms, but you kind of often, if you're missing the emotional one, your rom-com is probably terrible. If you're missing the physical one, your rom-com might be able to get away with it. It depends. Like, movies are living, breathing things. Action movies, it's the emphasis is on the physical plot, but there usually has to be some kind of emotional plot, or you're missing a component of your action movie. You can not have an emotional component of an action movie, I think, and it'll still succeed, but you can't have a physicalist,
right?
Like, so it's kind of they're kind of the reverse.
Think of was it The Foreigner? Is that the name of that Jackie Chan film where you watched him build bombs a bunch? It was unsatisfying because I was there to see Jackie Chan physically fight people.
Right.
I thought he did some good acting in it. There was some emotional stuff to his character, but it was an action film and I was there to see him do action things.
Right. And so because of the conventions of the genres, like, again, It Happened One Night is really solid in all its conventions and its pacing and everything. It's interesting having this discussion of structure, and really It Happened One Night is like, they probably teach this in film classes. I probably just didn't get it in mine, but like, the meet cute, here's some conflict, we have to change things, now we're doing this. Now the conflict is that it's a chaser era and they have to occupy the same room together when they're changing, and that whole deal. So it's and the pre-code aspects, I think, are Clarke Gable without a shirt and like her hiking up her skirt. Like that's the pre-code aspect, really.
There's a reference to sex at the end, which to us is very innocent, but even that might have been more than they.
Yeah, I'm of the modern era, so I enjoy a movie that has sex in it if it belongs there. But I also don't mind that, like, some of what's interesting about movies from the 30s to the 60s is the way they get around the code is often more creative than just showing people having sex.
Yeah.
So not that, like, it's each movie, but the tone and the style of each movie does its own thing. But at the end of this movie, when you finally get to the scene and like he's asked for a clothesline and like they have a blanket and like they get the telegram or whatever, like and they turn, the walls of Jericho come down and the lights go off and you're like, oh, I'm so happy. It's a symbol. It's all a symbol, but it's such it's like setup and payoff. It's just everything. Like, you get the first time it happens, then they do it another time and she's more comfortable. And now they're gone completely. So
it's interesting. The last thing, I'm actually going to bring up Alien versus Predator, oddly enough. I think because, just real quick, because when we talked about that, how it kind of does the things all the movies before it did. So if you like going up and down that mountain, you might enjoy Alien versus Predator, but if that's all it does, I feel like this is one of those movies that makes the path. Like, this is a movie that like built the path. So when you watch it, if you've seen a lot of rom-coms, it's 90 years later almost since this movie has been made.
Whoa, yeah.
It looks very familiar. You've been up and down this mountain before, but this is the first one. And, the interesting thing is sometimes those ones don't hold up as well because other people have done it better since. But I thought this held up pretty well. I don't know that I loved it because it just isn't quirky enough for me. It's just not weird enough for me. But for what it was, it was really solid. It built a good trail through a nice mountain.
I was actually totally going to make this point too. So you're making it instead of me. We've both seen The French Connection, and I like The French Connection, but you and a number of people don't feel that it holds up as well against some of the more modern versions of its genre for whatever reason. And you're right. It Happened One Night is not that. Sure, it's of an era, and if you really want to get hung up on the weird gender, some of the smaller weird gender stuff, and it's not anywhere near as bad as any number of other movies, you can, but otherwise it still really functions as a rom-com. Like it's almost like you could imagine your grandparents doing this or something. Like maybe in 100 years it'll be like your great grandparents. Like I imagine this movie is just going to kind of hold up as time goes on. Like it's not, there's nothing so objectionable in it that I could really find, anybody being...
if you're watching a movie from the 30s, you have to be prepared to deal with some of that stuff, and it can be more. I mean, there's stuff in the 60s that's worse. Some of the
Gigi and
Lily.
Yeah, well, but I'm not even talking about like the problematic stuff. I mean, there's nothing objectionable even about the story or like how it's put together. Like it's from 34, but it looks like it could be long, and this could be like a modern, a modern
except for Claudette's eyebrows. You don't see those kind of eyebrows ever.
Not so much.
I think they did it in the 90s a little bit. Pencil thin. They kind of gave her head it made her face have an interesting shape to it. That and her hairstyle.
I've seen women like that, but maybe that was when I was younger. But there's nothing somebody could make this now, and it could be like, oh, this is somebody's love letter throwback to an earlier era. Almost, they do things differently now, I think, but still, it really. Yeah, this was just a really solid, good movie. Like, this is the kind, we were like, when we were talking about Alien versus Predator, the Cloverfield paradox, it's like, well, maybe you want to watch this. Well, maybe if you did. This is a movie where it's like, if you don't like rom-coms, watch this movie.
Yeah, it's good. It's really, it's good. Like, it's solid.
It's a classic for a reason. It's
enjoyable.
It's enjoyable. Even if you don't like the genre, you might like this anyways. This might get you into watching rom-coms more. Like, this is one of those movies.
Yeah, I agree.